So, and also the news feeds, don't get all wrapped up in the news. That's a distraction. So there's an equation to it. The more the food crops are lost on the planet and the more the food prices are going to rise, the bigger the distraction they need, the more Hollywood-esque it needs to become to just wrap your mind in other things, anything other than the reality of our food on the planet.
Hi, this is the Celestial Report, very early in the morning for some of us, and but we have our coffee and we're ready to go. My special guest this morning, and I know it's something that we've been looking forward to for a long time, is David DuByne of Adapt 2030. And I know that many of you came up to me during Branson and said that you followed his work. And so we're teaming up today to answer your questions on the grand solar minimum. And welcome, David. Bottom line, don't just take the farmers for it. Go to their sources because they may or may not know, and they have busy lives. Farming is extremely time. It takes a lot of time to farm, and so maybe they're just not checking their sources. So if you want pure food and pure stock, you're going to have to go all the way to the seed, or all the way to the heirloom product to ensure that you get that.
Oh, that's a rather deep trench.
Sorry.
That's a rather deep trench.
I went down the rabbit hole. One thing, and I know you've covered it, but some other people are covering it too, is that at least 20% of the seed stock for next year has been destroyed due to all these climate stuff like seed potatoes, and this is going to affect more than just seed potatoes. So everybody should get their seed stock early, because I know some seeds that I get purchased on January 1st, and if I don't do it, like within 10 days, they're gone. So if the seed stock has been dented by 20% minimum and maybe higher than that, everybody needs to buy seeds early. Thoughts?
Yeah, Christian over at Ice Age Farmer has done some amazing work these last 2 weeks, putting together what exactly these seeds are in which part of the country and which seeds across the planet and which parts are being constricted for next year. And in a long story short, Christian up at Ice Age Farmer, you want to check out his work, but beans, corn, different types of corn, popcorn, blue corn, seed potatoes, and he had quite a few others just rolling on with different types of vegetable seeds and whatnot. So predominantly Northwest U.S. up Idaho and further over into Washington, et cetera, has been greatly affected. So it's 20% this year. Okay, we can deal with that. What if it's 20% or 30% next year? That's at the point where we're at a break even, and then if it happens a third year in a row, then we're down to nothing. Because I was talking the same thing about carryover stocks globally. If we come into this really reduced season like we've had this year for global yields are down everywhere, there's probably 9 down versus 1 up this year in terms of global agriculture. 9 countries have lost production versus 1 country that has increased production. And when I say increase, I'm not talking record increases, a little bit up. There's some carryover stocks still left over, plus what we have this year. So we're going to see some price movement, but the prices have been artificially suppressed. But as we come into next year, if we get the same losses again, then we're going to have to dig deeper into the carryover stocks. And all the numbers I have, and this comes from the USDA and the World Agriculture Association, WFO, World Food Organization, and different agencies that are monitoring the amount of carryover crops that we have. We have 3 years left at this rate. If we get another year like this, just say it's not worse, but say it's exactly the same as this year, we have 3 years left before we're back to all we get is what we grow for the year. 3 years. But again, it's right on the same time frame, like 2023, 24, where the 5G needs to be unrolled, the EU Unified Defense Force, Rapid Response Highway System needs to be completely constructed and done, cut the ribbons, and then the EU Unified Defense Force interoperability needs to be finished, and the England needs to be included in that, or I should say the The British Isles need to come in under their guise. And then we see all these things happening in the States on the same timelines. So what is it about this magic number of 2023 that everybody's around this planet's preparing for? It must be a massive, massive event that all governments know that something significant happens at this year. I'm saying the awareness rollover for the grand solar minimum is 2021 harvest season. But then quickly thereafter, that's only another year and a half, 2 years. And then perhaps it becomes a global, like, we don't have enough unless you grow it yourself kind of thing. And then, you see some more political maneuvering and some saber rattling, and maybe, they're going to have to try to distract everybody. And and also the news feeds, don't get all wrapped up in the news. That's a distraction. So there's an equation to it. The more the food crops are lost on the planet and the more the food prices are going to rise, the bigger the distraction they need, the more Hollywood-esque it needs to become to just wrap your mind in other things, anything other than the reality of our food on the planet. So the bigger the Hollywood-esque-ness of these events that are wrapping your mind in the newsfeed, there's a direct equivalent on how much crop has been lost or what our yield deductions are for the year. I kind of leave it there.
Well, I think that's why we're seeing this emphasis on almost starvation diets.
Yes, exactly.
About the cellulose. So if you're on a starvation diet, which is 1,500 calories, and you're eating 50% cellulose, so that's taking you down to 750 calories. And so it's becoming trendy to, have this starvation diet. Don't eat carbs, don't eat sugars, don't eat this and that. The problem is as we enter a colder period of time, people do need the carbs, and they do need, it doesn't need to be sugar, processed sugar. It can be honey or different other things. But you are going to need to bump up your calories. And to live on 750 calories or less during a time of freezing cold, you would not make it. I mean, it's not only would your body and your organs not be able to keep you warm, you wouldn't be able to think. The Russians did a study, and mortality increased by 20% at 1,500 calories. And then also, clerical workers were not able to think. They just had no thinking capacity because they didn't have enough calories for their brains to fuel their brains. And then, so you and I have been talking about cognition of this from this grand solar minimum cosmic ray situation
and magnetic field decline.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my first thing, it keeps coming back to the basics of the food first, because the cellulose, anything that you buy, the more I research into this, anything that you buy that's low fat or high fiber, it contains up to 30% cellulose. And I think you were telling me that even in the concentration camps that they were putting a lot of cellulose in the soup to give them a full belly there. And I actually did a bunch more research on that. And believe it or not, in World War II, they actually did studies of taking the cellulose way up to 70%, and then nobody could survive. So they ended up pulling it back. And this is why in today's society in the supermarkets, they're allowed to put anywhere from up to 30% by law, 3.5% in meat. Most producers are running it at a minimum of 18%, and the maximum allowable is 30%. So obviously they learned something that you can't go over the 30, but I'm going to say for sure as the crops are reduced, they're going to have to make the food appear that it's larger and appear to fill your belly. So they're going to ask and legislate. So this is the thing. You are lobbying. So I'm going to say any lobbyists out there that know about politics in D.C., an indicator of the crop losses will be if they're lobbying to get a higher cellulose percentage, be able by law mandated to be able for them to increase to put into foods. It could be a 5% increase, 2% increase, 10% increase, doesn't really matter. If they're lobbying to put more cellulose in the food, we are at levels of crop losses that are now going to be affecting society.
I think where we need to look, and actually maybe after we pop off here, that actually is determined by the Codex Alimentarius through the UN. And when they made all these different determinations within the last, I guess, about 7 years of the different additives, adulterants, and maximum levels. So they are actually the ones that make the decision. And all the United States does is implement the UN mandate. So I'll have to check on cellulose at the Codex and see what they have to say, because there may be like a matrix timeline for increasing the cellulose in products. So I'll check that out.
Yeah, thanks. And they also had just a huge blow to their cellulose production down in Brazil because sugarcane just got tremendously crushed because of the cold temperatures. They're even closing a couple sugarcane processing plants up in the U.S. because whatever's happening in South America and Brazil, they just got the temperatures got so cold that it really damaged the sugarcane. The reason I brought that up is because sugarcane is one of the number one things to turn a plant into cellulose, because the bagasse, after they squeeze the sugar juice out of there, the actual sugar water, so they can refine it, make it into sugar, that is perfect bagasse. That is perfect cellulose-based material. After they bleach it, it's nearly perfect white, and it blends in with liquids, and it turns transparent in liquids. But they were planning on using sugarcane cellulose as the number one additive ingredient. But because they're losing their base stock now, I don't know where that leaves them, because if they don't have the base input of all that sugarcane bagasse to be able to make all this cellulose, they're kind of getting into what happens if they run out of enough cellulose? Then what happens? If they don't have the cellulose for all the filler, they're either going to have switch fillers, or else they're going to have to reduce the real size of the product. And you're going to walk in and go, well, that thing that used to be this big is now this big because we just lost all the filler out of it. You know, there's a lot of things moving forward in our society that I don't think people are really mentally prepared for or thinking about, and how the government's going to string us down the line to try to make everything appear as normal until the very last second.
So one of my family's favorite traditions when I was growing up were these cream-filled horns. So it's like a pastry, and it looks like a cornucopia, and it was filled with sweet cream. And we loved them as kids. I mean, we just thought that was the greatest thing. And we didn't get them that often, so it had that special appeal. So one time about, I don't know, like 15 years ago, I went to the store and they had cream horns. And I mean, it was like $8 at the time for like 4 cream horns. But I thought, oh, I'm entertaining tonight. I'll spend the $8 on it. It brought back memories, you know. So I bring the cream horns home and I cut them up because, you know, I was having quite a few guests that night. And so there was cream on the end, and there was the pastry horn, and inside was complete all air. It was artificial. There was nothing there. It was just air. No sweet cream except at the very end to make you think that the product had cream all the way through it. So they're going to be pulling these types of tricks on us whenever we buy commercial food. Thank goodness that we don't, when we make something ourselves. If I want a lot of pie filling in my pie, I put a lot of pie filling in my pie, and I know exactly what that filling is. There are no surprises. That's another advantage for DIY.
And again, you know, these home cooking recipes, I mean, it's going to be far cheaper for you to buy these base ingredients like the flour, as long as it's quality flour, and do some of these things at home versus going out to the stores and buying them. So again, our cooking styles are probably going to shift, and we're going to come back into pioneering cookbooks or something that you can make some really delicious recipes out of, something really far back in time or even more remotely in time, but something that relies on a lot more base ingredients, longer cooking times to really stew everything together. And just look back in the past and see how clean and pure the foods were in our diets, and it didn't have so many ingredients. You know, you turn over a box today, there's like 35 things in it. Why? You know, cooking chicken soup, it should be chicken, chicken broth, vegetables, and some salt, right?
Yep. Yep.
And think how much more you can make for yourself too if you use the same amount of money versus buying all the processed stuff in the store. If you buy the base ingredients, I mean, you can make a huge pot that could last you for a couple of days versus a one-time serving out of the store.
And you can can it, or you can freeze it, so, you know, so that it doesn't go to waste. And, you know, you can always recycle. Like if I have a little bit of stuff left over, I know Zippy, my dog, will eat something. The chickens will eat if I have leftover rice or barley or something like that. The chickens can eat it, or even vegetables. You know, so nothing needs to go to waste.
Yeah, and to get that, yeah, that's another thing to think about too, is how much food we do waste. What is about 20% of all foods wasted? So maybe some of the first measures, here's an opportunity as well to become a specialist in the non-food wastage and, try to, but again, most people's cooking at home, they make too much, they throw it away. A restaurant, you don't eat your full portion, they throw it away. Something has a little bit of brown on it, supermarket throws it away. I mean, there's a lot of throwaway in our societies at the moment, but I think this might start to reduce itself and families will start to really save leftovers again moving forward. And stores might sell like the offside stuff over here in the bin because that stuff's really expensive. This is only sort of expensive. Maybe they'll find a whole new class of sellable produce or whatever because people will still want to buy it because it's available. I don't know, but food wastage is a huge one. We could, boost up a fair bit of food by just not wasting it and add to the totals that we're wasting.
Yeah, I went to the health food store yesterday and I was shocked because when I get a lemon on my lemon tree, it's like this big. It's as big as my hand, each lemon. And so I go to the health food store yesterday and they had these like less than a chicken egg, less than a small chicken egg, lemons. And they looked like they were shot with buckshot, They were bruised and brown and they were dry looking. $3 a pound for these sad looking lemons. And I got to tell you, I just go to my windowsill and I pick lemons, limes, oranges right off my tree. So for Christmas, I'll have my mandarin orange that I pick off my tree. And I mean, you can't get any fresher tree dense than that, I love it.
Yeah, look at some of the, again, if you want to talk about woo-woo, I mean, people talking to their plants, playing music for the plants, tending to the plants, touching the plants, and they find much, 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 much higher yields. Like Findhorn is a super good example. Up in Findhorn, they had people that's what they do to prove these experiments is they go and talk to the vegetables and, send the energy into them. And they're getting some of the most astounding yields on some of the poorest soils on the planet. So there's really some validity into the vibration frequency from your voice or your thought or your touch or your hands into these plants that are growing for you. So we've been taken to the point of everything's mechanized. Well, why don't we take it back to the point of looking in the ancient past to see how they're using real energy fields to boost yields on plants. And this is kind of where I'm going to. We set all of our own personal energy aside to corporations. We got to take it back. It's no longer going to be mechanized farm machinery, and that's all you get at the end is like something in a bag or a box. If you talk to your plants and play music for them and do other things, your yields can be greatly increased. But if you do it one person, what if you do it 10 or 20 people? And think about that. Now, we don't do that's a completely removed art form from our modern infrastructure or our modern day thinking. I mean, how many times have you had a conversation with somebody about talking and loving your plants? I mean, it's almost unheard of. So maybe we need to start thinking back some of these ancient traditions again to bring back, maybe there really is no scarcity. The scarcity is all fake. They make you think that it's scarce, but it's not really. With a few vibrational tricks that we would really have abundance. Your body doesn't need as much food either. We've been tricked into thinking we have to eat 3 meals a day and we need all this and this and this. But go back to the ancient traditions and they didn't. They existed on less food, pulling energy out of the ether, if you will, substituting with the food and getting more complete burns. And there's like all these ancient techniques for chanting and breathing to get higher output out of the calories and fats that you put in your body versus just shoveling it in and then back to work. So these ancient techniques are where we kind of need to go for this modern future that we're facing. I think there's a lot of mysticism and a lot of things in the ancient world that we have been purposely taught to forget to get us into this lack and scarcity mind frame that there's not going to be enough. Maybe on a global level, but perhaps on a personal level, if we start using these techniques again, we could have complete abundance around where we live, even though there might be other things mechanized-wise shortages around us.
I think much of the ancient wisdom is common sense. And I know that I give my plants a lot of love. I give my plants a lot of attention. And unfortunately, given the situation at hand, I have been noticing, I would say 5 years ago, I started noticing a sharp decline in the size of the plants, how many fruits were on the plant, the size of the fruits, the quality of the fruits, even to the point of not as vibrant color in the fruits. So, I mean, I believe in the vibrational aspect of farming. I think you have to integrate that, um, and I do. But even with that, these days, it's a challenge, and it's probably going to be more of a challenge. I'll let you know, as we move forward, you know, what next year brings. I know, each year it's bumped down about 20% in production. Like I used to get 1,000 pounds of tomatoes. Now I'm down to maybe 50, 75 pounds of tomatoes. It's just, and some will
Wow.
do very good and others won't. That's why I grow 500 different crops and a high diversity. And I guess it's time that we kind of wrap up. Why don't you tell everybody how to, if they're a new listener or follower, how to get a hold of you to follow your work because you do great work. I get my cup of coffee in the morning and I listen to David. So
I'll join you with another cuppa. Yeah, you can find me up on Adapt 2030 on the YouTube channel. And I also run a podcast, Mini Ice Age Conversations. And through the social media, I'm trying to get off of Twitter and Facebook. I'm moving a lot of things over into Minds, M-I-N-D-S, and also over onto Gab, the free speech platform. Brighteon, which is another alternative to YouTube, and also BitChute. You can find me there with Adapt 2030 on both those channels. And you see an enormous amount of people talking right now, like, how do you get a hold? Well, I have a newsletter also up on oilseedcrops.org. If you go up there, you move your mouse around for a few seconds, pop-up box will come. Because this is the new communication method. Then we're gonna have to go back to writing again. People are gonna have to communicate writing and stay in touch this way. Climate revolution, and it's about half of it's about the problem that we face. The magnetic field we didn't talk about too much, but the other half of the book is about the solutions. It's 220 pages. So to talk about the problem itself is not really helpful. It's great to like set the framework, but to really get, encompass everything, it's about the solutions part. And I think a lot of it's going to be indoor vertical agriculture and new industries spurring out of this need to morph and change our food growing. Because as you're already seeing, if they're going away from hard red winter wheat into sorghum, because that grows, the hard red winter wheat is not growing anymore. So they're experiencing on mechanized farms, Celeste, exactly what you're experiencing with your tomato losses. Well, they're experiencing it with a hard red winter wheat. And they figured out that sorghum grows for now. So look for this massive switch. I mean, eventually we're going to have to start thinking about your own family's going to have to grow your own food indoors to try to supplement for what you can get out. So there's all these, we're going to have to like step back in the past, and we're going to have to think more pioneering lifestyle. Like you're living it. It's new for most of us. I mean, I'm moving out of the cities here to get back to more rural area myself, because I already see the writing on the wall. It's time, the flag's already been waved. It's time to go. Hong Kong, all of Asia starting to fall apart. The political landscape out here, you can already see the writing on the wall where this is going. So it's time to go somewhere different for more. If you're going to be into your safety and fallback positions, you might want to start packing things up and getting that next move in mind right now, because it's going to happen fast. It's going to be a swift thing. It's not going to be, we're not going to still be here in 2030 talking about the same stuff. For sure not. This is going to be like 2021, and you're like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have sold my family's land kind of stuff.